Well, hello friends and fans everywhere. Once again, it's your fitness captain here, Jason speaking. Just worked a couple days in a row in the hot sunshine. So it's my day off today and just enjoying another positively sublime, glorious day here in the powerful country of Canada. That's right. So great to be alive. That's right. Well, friends and fans and my weary travelers, why don't you take your coat off, grab a stool or chair, come warm yourself by the fire. Join me, will you? Stay with me for a while as I tell you another story and give you my deep research, approximation, analysis, investigation, and discussion on the all-important subject, you know what I'm about to say, of the SSP, the Secret Space Program. That's right, because it's massive. It is gigantic, friends and fans. There is so much going on in space and so much going on beneath our oceans, it's unreal. And it's never talked about on mainstream media. And that, my friends and fans, is absolutely disgusting. It's vile, it's ignorant, it's stupid. Words can't even explain, because we should be told about this. Because, my friends and fans, for no other reason, your hard-earned taxpayers' money largely is going towards all these under-ocean bases, the underground bases. It's going to the UFO, amazing technology that was developed, for starters, with the Nazis, and then the Americans conglomerated with the Nazis, of course, to develop amazing anti-gravity. I've talked extensively, actually, about that some of the technology in previous videos, friends and fans, and we'll definitely go more into it on future videos. But let me give you an example, friends and fans, because again, let me just give you a quick overview of the ideology and methodology of the Nazis back in the day in Nazi Germany, okay? So, to remind you, friends and fans, they were National Socialists, right? They believed in a multinational corporate state with multinational ruling, all right? So they believed in socialism. They wanted the banksters in control. Of course, we see that in our world today, and the corporate power. And we'll talk about that corporate power, how the corporations hide a lot of the technology nowadays with the space-related theme that's going on with breakaway civilizations. So again, they believed in a multinational corporate state with that multinational ruling. Hitler, he wanted like a social welfare state, universal health care, right? Some of those philosophies or belief systems are good, even though, of course, Hitler was a dubious, evil man, unfortunately. All right? What else? Let me just angle the camera here. So, and speaking of the Nazis, friends and fans, we got to talk about the evil financial genius, that being Martin Bormann, who I've talked about before, but for those of you who may not have seen the video, or if you just want a second time listening, let me just describe this guy. So my favorite researcher, Joseph P. Farrell, he describes Martin Bormann. He had the warmth and charm of Dick Cheney. I say minus 50%. What a guy. He was a piece of work. And so this Martin Bormann, you know, as they were stalemating, they knew they weren't going to win the war, right? They couldn't hold out much longer. He set up an organized flight capital strategic evacuation program to move all that Nazi German loot, this huge amount of liquidity, move it out of Germany to other countries, right? Move it to the and through the banks, like the Bank of International Settlements, Bank of Switzerland, and so forth. All right. Then he set up front companies all over the world in conjunction with Nazi liaison officers. All right, and was with the express purpose of utilizing that capital, rebuilding Europe. Okay, and incidentally, they creating the European Federation with the Nazis dominating. No duh, right? And I've said before, friends and fans, Joseph will tell you that the modern European Union, if you look at it, it mirrors almost exactly what they were trying to accomplish at the end of World War II. Why did I just flex my pecs? I'm not sure, probably because I know I'm going to do a chest workout tomorrow. But sorry, friends and fans, again, Joseph P. Farrell, he says that the modern European Union mirrors almost exactly what they were trying to accomplish at the end of World War II with the likes of the Reichsbank, sponsors like that, and of course, big IG Pharma, right? So Martin Bormann So he used all that liquidity. He set up like a sorry about the noise. He set up like a multi-extraterritorial state with its own command structure, all right, certainly involved in covert operations. And it had, of course, also very deep connections to the multinational corporate world, okay? So again, a lot of money and wealth there. We know that much of the hierarchy in Germany escaped, unfortunately, to Italy, okay? And eventually into Chile, all over South America. So that's just part of history there, friends and fans, to give you an overview and a synopsis of that kind of history. Because it's important, friends and fans, because in terms of the technologies that the Nazis were working on, friends and fans, remember, we're getting a breeze here, friends and fans, the Nazis were way ahead of Russia and America largely in technology in all countries. Everybody knows that, okay? They were working on amazing covert stuff. And one of the prime examples, the primo example of that I will give to you, friends and fans, was a project called the Glock, which stands for the bell in English, okay? It was shaped like a bell. We know from witnesses from even concentration survivors that saw this device levitate above the treetops. Now, it didn't fly like your typical UFO, of course, going at amazing speeds and turning, but it levitated. So a lot of researchers think, and I'm one of them, that thinks that was definitely a primitive anti-gravity, okay? And there's a lot of electricity involved in that project. I'll give you an example in a few minutes. But so we didn't get the documents on this project called the Glock till 1990, all right? But now we know it existed. And why it's significant, friends and fans, first of all, this project was, sorry, I'm just looking around, see if anybody's walking around in our beautiful park. This project was rated more top secret than even the atom bomb. I'm not kidding, friends and fans. This was the, I forget the term in German that was used at the time, but again, the most highly classified project. So classified, in fact, that one of the hierarchy in Germany, I forget his name, he was assigned and literally killed 60 scientists that worked on that project. They wanted to keep it totally secret, hush hush from the world and the public. So, and that's disgusting, killing off 60 Nazi scientists that worked on the project. Jesus. But anyway, or scientists. And so there was a lot going on, friends and fans. Whatever technology was involved, and for sure it was some sort of primitive anti-gravity. We're going to get into that in a minute, what I think it was. But it had future ramifications, therefore, for other technologies. They knew that, okay? For space-related objects, in other words, UFOs. So I'll give you an example. Here's the breakthroughs that the Nazis were working on, friends and fans. And keep in mind, I guess Hitler back in the day, Joseph says that, you know, he had a scientist sort of think outside the box at that time. It was almost like a think tank, the first ever think tank back then, I think, that was going on. And maybe that's partly why the Nazi scientists came up with these amazing technological developments. So, for example, in 1935, friends and fans, we had a brilliant Hungarian Jewish scientist, not Einstein, he was brilliant too, but a guy named Gabriel Krohn, who later worked for General Electric, actually, later in his career. That should tell you something right there. But this guy, Gabriel Krohn, wrote a paper. Boy, the wind's coming up, friends and fans. He wrote a paper in 1935 that won him the Maori Physics Prize, okay? And what he said in this paper, I learned this from Joseph P. Farrell again, what he said in this paper is nothing short of breathtaking. Because he said we electrical engineers can figure out the phase Cree and so on and huge network electrical rotating systems by the use of tensor calculus. Now I'm going to characterize, you guys, friends and fans, what he just said in a few different ways. First of all, he's saying, in other words, we can use that whole hyperdimensional mathematical language because, again, Einstein and the physicists are working with general theory of relativity, of course, which was Einstein's expertise. They're also working on unified field theory. Sorry, Einstein was working on general theory of relativity, and they're working on unified field theory. So they're saying we can use that whole hyperdimensional mathematics to take it out of the realm of theory and explain what only happens on a stellar planetary scale, but we can bring it right down here on the laboratory bench, okay? And they're saying, in other words, we electrical engineers now can figure out the anomalies in any electrical circuit, okay? Because by dent of the case, any electrical circuit is a hyperdimensional machine. And they figure these anomalies basically interface with our three-dimensional world, right? And what takes place in 4, 5, and 6 dimensions. So another way to characterize it, friends and fans, he's just told you that by using 1935 technology with hyperdimensional mathematical analysis, they now can basically manufacture the cellular structure of space-time. I mean, it's just amazing. Think about it, friends and fans. If you can figure out the anomalies in these electrical circuits, they're manipulating electromagnetism and gravity, okay? Sensational stuff. And in 1936, what did you have? Well, you had a guy named Dr. Richter who's doing this, another brilliant, this guy is a Nazi scientist, this one. He was a bank frauder and all that too, but this guy was doing plasma experiments. And they were so amazing that actually, you know, America at the time in the 1950s, let's go to the 1950s for a moment, Americans were doing their atomic bomb tests, okay? It was called, oh my God, I can't remember the name of the project. Project Winter Haven. That wasn't it. Castle Bravo, sorry. Castle Bravo. So they were doing these nuclear bomb tests, and they were predicting yields from the bombs to go at about, I don't know, 7 or 8 megatons, right? But this thing was running off at about 13, 14 megatons, or 12 megatons at least. And they couldn't figure it out. And Dr. Richter was saying over in Argentina that he was getting the thermal gradients for his nuclear fusion tests at far, far below what was known as the threshold of the magnitude theory at the time. Okay, he was getting the pressurized gradients much lower. So the Air Force, they're trying to figure out what the hell does this guy know that we don't, okay? So if you dig into the FOIA requests and read his the research carefully, friends and fans, you find out that the United States, what they do, they send a private committee to the Air Force to go interview Dr. Richter in Argentina. Of course, Richter's working for Juan Perón at the time, right? And by the way, Richter was lambasted in the press very heavily on his theories at the time because he was going against the standard modern theory, saying that he was getting these thermal gradients far below the magnitude. So Richter tells the Air Force, he says, oh, well, you know, I'm doing these nuclear fusion experiments and I'm seeing the results as early as 1936, you know, and, you know, these thermal gradients, of course, you need millions of degrees Kelvin, of course, to pressurize the gradients needed for fusion. Okay, that's the first thing, as the Americans know. And so he's doing these fusion experiments, and he tells you, like it or not, friends and fans, that the gradients, the pressurized gradients, these thermonuclear bomb tests, they vary on time and place, depending on that local lattice structure of space. And therefore, the energy gated within depends on that reaction within the structure. So he's just told you, friends and fans, to the Air Force, he's giving the first version of what they call local lattice assisted reaction, which is now the modern accepted theory by just about every physicist when it comes to nuclear bomb tests and cold fusion, how cold fusion works. It's called local lattice reaction. So just amazing stuff. And he tells you that, oh, by the way, I'm doing these plasma experiments and I'm rotating them at the high low Morero precession frequency. So he's rotating them at amazing speeds. Howdy. And he's telling you at the same time he's rotating these nuclear plasmas, okay? It's nuclear plasma. He's injecting them with globs of direct high current electricity. Now, what does that resemble? Well, that's exactly what they were doing with the Glock project that I told you, friends and fans, that highly classified project rated more top secret than the atom bomb that the Nazis were working on, right? Just got to check my time, friends and fans. Sorry, the camera dropped because of the wind again. Can't wait to get my video camera. So the plasma experiments, friends and fans, he's telling you that he basically worked on the Glock, okay? Because they're rotating that plasma and injecting them again with this high static current electricity, all right? So that's significant. And then he tells the Air Force, just this statement startling. I can't get over it, friends and fans, because it has so much significance to it as well. He tells the Air Force, so I theorize that nuclear plasma, when it's under high electromagnetic stress, I theorize that it acts as a transmuter for the local lattice cellular structure of space-time, and for a brief moment creates the transduction phenomena that we call zero-point energy. Well, friends and fans, that's the first time zero-point energy was ever used. I mean, and now books have been written on it, right? They're talking about getting the energy within the ether of space, which the American scientists began working on very heavily, by the way, in the 1950s, when they were working on anti-gravity, and they knew what the Nazis were working on, okay? And later the Americans, they developed absolutely amazing anti-gravity spacecraft, no question about it. We can get to Mars within 5 days. They even theorized in the 1950s, according to my book, and I'll show you, friends and fans, one day, that they even predicted back then that they would be able to get to Mars in 5 days with this kind of technology. Just unreal. So, friends and fans, Richter is again showing you the Nazis were doing these amazing experiments and research back in 1936 and throughout the late 1930s, obviously even after the war as well. And we know that in Antarctica, I've talked about this, friends and fans, extensively, that of course, here's the timeline. So that was in the late 1930s. Now let's get to 1947. Of course, you had infamous Operation High Jump, right? Sorry if I sound serious, friends and fans. As I say, it's a serious topic though. Just try to get my water here. It's a very hot, sultry day, friends and fans. Again, positively sublime though. Gotta flex, it's always good for the muscles. Trying to work on my tan, friends and fans. And I can't wait to do more chest workouts. But, whoa. So we had infamous Operation High Jump, right, in 1947. And that was with, of course, with Admiral Byrd was the sponsor. It was oversaw by the first Secretary of Defense for the United States at the time by, his name was James Forrestal, okay? So he chose the famous explorer Admiral Byrd to sponsor this huge expedition of manpower. We're talking 4,700 soldiers, at least 13 ships. You had a destroyer, you had airplanes, you had this whole gamada of flotilla fleet of aircraft. I kind of use my own words there, friends and fans, but this massive fleet going to Antarctica. Now, of course, the United States, they always have to put out a cover story. It was really lame. They said, oh, well, we're going for scientific research, and they were sort of just going to create little America, right? They probably also went down there doing nuclear bomb tests. But friends and fans, the only real reason why the Americans would send so many troops and all these ships to Antarctica, all you have to know, friends and fans, is that the Nazis, the Germans, went to Antarctica at least twice. They also went to Tibet. This all took place in the 1930s. The Americans knew that. There was no question they were going to Antarctica to survey the Nazi situation. And even the Billy Carson will tell you, who owns his own space company, that's why they went, okay? And we're going to talk about Billy Carson's research in a few moments, hopefully, friends and fans, if I remember, because it's very important what this man says as well. And Joseph P. Farrell has covered this infamous Operation High Jump as well. But it's significant, friends and fans, because so the Americans go down there, they bring all these troops, and what happens? Well, they're scheduled to be there for 7 to 8 months, okay? But they hightailed it out of there in less than 2 months. The question is why? What would make America abandon such a huge investment in time, money, and manpower, right? Well, I believe they were attacked by the Nazis. There's no question in my mind, actually. And the reason why we know this, friends and fans, is because Admiral Byrd tells you himself in so many words. He knew he was going to get debriefed when he went home to the United States and never be able to talk about this event and what went down ever again. So he had press on the ship. They had press on the ship, a Chilean newspaper reporter. The newspaper was called the El Mercurio Santiago, okay? And Byrd tells the reporter as they're leaving, he says, well, we were attacked by an unknown enemy. Now, because Byrd, he couldn't specify who it was. He couldn't come out and say, oh yeah, we were attacked by the Nazis. But he did say they were attacked by an unknown enemy. He warned the U.S. that this enemy could fly from pole to pole at extreme speeds. Okay, and that says a lot, because back then, of course, friends and fans, and even today with conventional aircraft, it takes a long time to fly from pole to pole. You have to refuel, right? So there was a high pitch of technologies obviously involved. And you also had whistleblowers. Now, you can't literally take this to the bank, but I think the whistleblowers, there's definitely a grain of truth involved here. If you know what Byrd said, and then you got whistleblowers literally saying that discs came out from the ice and fired lasers on the ships at the troops. And there were even reports that hundreds of soldiers died, okay? And also, if you know that the Nazis, it's literally documented, they had at least prototypes of UFOs, these big UFO discs. One of them was called the Hannibal craft that apparently had amazing speeds. And even back then, there were reports that it was able to get to Mars in no time. So again, the Nazis definitely had, I believe, impenetrable under ice bases formed by 1947. And this is where I differ from the great Joseph P. Farrell, who's a ferocious researcher, one of my favorites. And also, there's a YouTuber named Joe from the Carolinas, who's a good researcher himself, but he's different than Joseph P. Farrell. He likes to add a lot of humor. He likes to cover extensively the whistleblowers, these guys that say they're in the secret space program, like Corey Goode, and they aren't. These guys are like so narcissistic. They're either delusional, thinking they were involved in the secret space program, or they're just like disinfo agents, disinformation. So, yeah, so Joe from the Carolinas and Joseph, they think that Germany, the Nazis, did not have time to establish much of an under ice base at the time, let alone, fleets of UFOs. I disagree, because again, it just goes back. If you know the Nazis had UFOs in the late 1930s, or at least prototypes, they had all those years from the late 1930s right up until 1947. All those years, even after the war, for covert production going totally uninterrupted in Antarctica. All right? Now, I'm not saying that they had necessarily like 100 UFOs built, but they certainly had enough, obviously, that could fly around and do damage to these ships. I don't think there's any question based on Byrd's statements. And there's no other country, friends and fans, that had that kind of technology that would have made deadly resistance happen to the U.S. And the only country was down there was the Nazis. No question, not even the Russians were down there. So, friends and fans, that's truly remarkable. And then just 5 years later, okay, you had, of course, the famous UFO flap above Washington Capitol. Just truly remarkable. In June, you had reports of UFOs from eyewitnesses in Britain. They were flying from coast to coast. On July, I believe, July 14th, you had UFOs zipping all over the place, seen by a Pan Am jet and eyewitnesses. Okay, that got people's eyebrows raised, naturally. But then the peak crescendo event, of course, happened just a few days later, on July 16th, where we had the buzzing of the Washington Capitol by about 7 objects seen by literally hundreds, if not thousands, of eyewitnesses. And first they appeared over the oceans, just right in front of the radar scopes. They weren't even tracked on radar at the time. It just appeared in front of the scopes, seemingly from nowhere. I believe they were probably coming from either Antarctica or Argentina, because remember, the hierarchy of Nazi Germany all went to Argentina largely, and there was definitely a lot of production going on in Argentina. Joseph P. Farrell thinks a lot was happening in Argentina as well. So one of the two places those UFOs were coming from, all right? So they buzzed the Washington Capitol, and the question is, who were they and why did they do it? Why were these objects seen there? What were they demonstrating? Well, again, friends and fans, I'm convinced that it was a rogue group of the Nazi Germans, maybe even the Americans with them, but I think it was largely the Nazis showing the Americans, hey, we have the technology, we have the anti-gravity mastered, we know you have our scientists now, hundreds of scientists through Operation Paperclip in the United States, in the national security state now, but you guys, the United States, you guys are supposedly a superpower, but you're going to have to deal with us Nazis right now, because we got a lot of leverage with the technology. Because why else would you see these 7 objects above Washington, D.C.? Even the United States Air Force, of course, they sent their fighter pilot jet planes to chase these things, and they couldn't catch them. It was too late. They never can catch these UFOs because they go way too fast, and change amazing speeds because of the anti-gravity. So, friends and fans, that was a remarkable event in 1952. And again, it shows you there was a breakaway civilization in 1952. There was anti-gravity. There was an amazing high-pitch technologies, as I like to describe, that wasn't seen in the public, other than in that event, it was seen by the public, because I think that was the way Nazis were demonstrating their superior air power at the time to the Americans largely. And what better way to do it than obviously buzzing the Washington Capitol? So that definitely would have got the Americans on guard. And we know during that time, what did the Americans do? They made all the devil dealings with the Nazis. Remember, again, we brought hundreds of paperclip scientists starting in 1947 to America. And there was only one reason, largely, because we wanted that UFO technology from the Nazis. What the likes of Richter and Gabriel Krone were working on, the electrical engineers, man. I'm telling you, friends and fans. And of course, we had like a Nazi superstate in NASA. To this day, friends and fans, the Nazis, I believe, with the Americans, control largely NASA. Because even back then, by the 1960s, when it rolled around with Kennedy, of course, sending the Saturn V to the moon, who did you have? You had, of course, Wernher von Braun, the famous, probably the most famous of the Nazi scientists, right, who invented the V-2 rocket, the famous, brilliant Wernher von Braun. So he was high up in NASA, of course, helping with the Apollo moon missions, with the rockets. But also, who was really the senior flight administrator during the Apollo moon missions? Not many people know about this, friends and fans, but I learned it from Joseph. You had a guy, a Nazi scientist by the name of, what was his name? Sorry, I just forgot. Hold on. Kurt Davis. That's right, Kurt Davis. And this is significant, friends and fans. Again, he was a senior flight administrator for the Apollo moon missions. He was getting all the UFO reports at the UFO desk during the Apollo missions. This guy was not even a rocket scientist. He was a plasma physicist. I repeat, a plasma physicist. That is significant, friends and fans, because it shows you there was a clandestine secret space program already in place in the 1960s. And I can prove to you that it was actually in existence even before 1965. And by 1965, we know there were structures all over the backside of the moon. And we know this from the likes of Carl Wolf, I believe was his name. He worked high up in NASA. He finally told the world about 30 years later in his retirement that he saw the photographs from one of the photo reconnaissance probes. He wasn't supposed to see these photos. He wasn't classified to see them, even though he did have top secret clearance, but he wasn't supposed to see these particular photos from one of the probes. And he describes, they had towers, there were domes. These towers were like a mile, 2 miles high. They had like satellite dishes, he described. I mean, just incredible. And it wasn't alien, friends and fans. I repeat, it was not alien. This is, we're talking covert, highly classified, high secret military infrastructure on the moon. So what I'm saying, friends and fans, Kurt Davis, you don't have a plasma physicist working on the Apollo moon missions unless you've got a technology that is to do with anti-gravity, plasma, remember the high torsion physics I told you about with the De Glock project, the likes of Dr. Richter with the rotating that plasma at amazing speeds. So that's highly significant, friends and fans. And again, so many Nazi scientists in NASA, right or wrong, it happened, okay? And the Americans, in other words, made a lot of devil dealings with those Nazis. I'll give you another example, okay? And there's a lot of good Americans, don't get me wrong. But at the time, friends and fans, I mean, you got Walter Dornberger, who was one of the most notorious Nazi scientists. This guy, I mean, this guy had such a cold heart. Apparently, he used to string up people if they didn't agree with him to do with the rocket program in the slave labor camps. I mean, this guy was a piece of work. So what did the Americans do? They brought him over to the United States. And what did the Americans, the good old Americans, do? They gave him a vice president position of Bell Helicopter. Can you believe it? Bell Helicopter. We've got a beautiful dog in the background here. Just enjoying this beautiful park. I don't know if you could see him. There, you could see him now. It's not my dog, but I love dogs. I love animals. Anyways, as I said, the Dornberger, He had Vice President Bell Helicopter. He had dinner, for heaven's sakes, with Nixon, the president at the time. And this is all documented, friends. He was on the itinerary list. There's photographs. So in other words, he was a deep state player, okay? And when you have Vice President of Bell Helicopter position, that you talk about infiltrating the sensitive military intelligence establishment, okay? That is the epitome of the devil dealings the Americans did with the Nazis. That's one example. I won't even get into all the others. But anyway, so amazing stuff going on, friends and fans, to do with the Nazis and the Americans. And again, so in other words, the Nazis conglomerated, they amalgamated with the Americans, in other words, in curating amazing high-pitched technologies with the anti-gravity, starting shortly after 1947. And as the 1950s went on, it took the Americans a while, apparently, according to my book. There were documents on anti-gravity. It was still freely in the publications largely, and the scientists and the companies were talking about how excited they were. They knew they were going to make a breakthrough, seemingly, in the very near future. But shortly after 1958, friends and fans, all of a sudden, that military clampdown on information happened. There was no more talk on anti-gravity. And by the way, another example of that, sort of a similar example, in 1935, Gabriel Krohn, I told you, when he wrote that, one of the Mayors Physics Prize, by the way, and I talked to you about that paper, what happened? Well, after that paper was written, there was no more publication in the American journals on unified field theory in Germany. It just totally went black. So again, that shows you the military clampdown on that, okay? So we got 1947, I talked about infamous Operation High Jump. I told you about the De Glock project in the 1930s, what the Nazi Germans were working on. I told you in 1952 that I believe the Nazis definitely buzzed the Washington Capitol, some rogue group with the military, showing the Americans where, you know, you've got to deal with us. We've got the leverage. We have the secrets of the anti-gravity. The Americans finally, after 1958, they finally conquered the anti-gravity. And now, friends and fans, remember I mentioned Billy Carson earlier? This man is not a whistleblower. He is a hardcore space insider. He has his own space company, okay? It's called First Class Space Agency. Now, they don't do launches like SpaceX, but they work with SpaceX. They work with the likes of the European Space Agency, NASA, in developing free energy devices and all kinds of other great stuff. Billy Carson's trying to help out humanity. But he will tell you what I already knew too, is that we've had anti-gravity for decades. And friends and fans, I'm telling you, we have been obfuscated from the truth. And you've heard me say this on other videos if you've watched any of my videos on the secret space program. We have been obfuscated from the truth on anti-gravity for 60 plus years now, friends and fans, and it has to stop. This is ridiculous because, friends and fans, we have had decades for the military-industrial complex to allow the public, us, to be able to culturally integrate anti-gravity, grounded in cultural control, get a cultural cohesiveness in getting used to this technology because it's going to revolutionize the world. It's going to be a whole new paradigm shift in science and technology. And friends and fans, you won't need stinky oil and gas anymore. There's going to be no hydro bills. Again, because you're going to get that energy literally from space-time itself, from the zero-point energy, okay? And my book, I'm going to show you next time on a video, hopefully, friends and fans, again, this book, The Secrets of Anti-Gravity, with the secrets from Tesla, you know, his research, of course, T. Townsend Brown, a famous American scientist that was born in Ohio. It's an amazing book, friends and fans, because it tells you about 50 to 100 ways that anti-gravity will help our world. And yet, the military-industrial complex, friends and fans, the shadow government, this financial cabal, call them what you will, the deep state, they have, again, covered it up and lied to us. I mean, it's absolute treason, friends and fans, what they've done. And an example of that, friends and fans, again, we know now that $21 trillion has gone totally off the books just since 1998 alone. 21 trillion. That's your hard-earned taxpayers' money, especially the Americans. And a lot of it's drug money as well. These certain governments, they know how to funnel money out of communities all across the United States. Catherine Austin Fitts was seeing that when she worked in the Bush administration, this brilliant accountant. She tells you, okay? And if you go back to the Reagan years, you're talking assets in excess of 48 to 50 trillion dollars or more, totally off the books. So you better believe, friends and fans, the military are getting a bang for their buck, okay? And you need many, many trillions of dollars, I would argue, for a massive secret space program. You've got hundreds of trillions of dollars, in other words, of hardware zipping around all over space and above Earth's orbit. Anybody can see this. Go to Secure Team. I've told you, friends and fans, with Tyler, he's got 1 million subscribers. You can see all the anomalies on the backside of the moon. You can see UFOs literally in craters, discs, triangles, massive cigar-shaped craft. Even Billy Carson tells you, friends and fans, cigar-shaped craft are the second most common shape of spacecraft other than flying saucers. And guess what? He tells you they're literally now the size of small cities, literally miles. You talk about being able to carry massive amounts of military hardware and technology off-world. They're going to the moon and Mars and have been going for decades, friends and fans. There's a massive covert production manufacturing going on. I'm telling my friends, I'm trying to show the world, friends and fans, we need to wake up, because you're not going to hear this on mainstream media. I always say research I find is very enticing, invigorating, and I'm trying to inspire your passion and stoke your intellectual curiosity, friends and fans, in these topics. Because again, I can't think of a more important subject than the UFO phenomenon, friends and fans. It is a multifaceted, complex subject. I realize that, with a lot of moving parts. But friends and fans, again, if we can get this technology finally for ourselves what we deserve, the anti-gravity in particular, and there's been many other free energies that have been suppressed, well then we can change the world for the better. It's going to be so positive, friends and fans. It's going to be unbelievable, okay? 60 plus years being lied to on this issue? Are you kidding me? And disinformation and lies? I mean, you never even hear anti-gravity talked about on mainstream media. If you hear my voice getting exasperated, friends and fans, and why I get irate with some of these military groups, and particularly in charge of the UFO file, the deep state, this is why, friends and fans. I'm trying to be an advocate for the truth. Together we can push the doors open for that truth, as I always say, and provide more transparency. We need transparency. It's a vital exercise in our world today, friends and fans, because you can't trust corporate media to tell you the truth. You get a very narrow scope of the truth, as I always say, right, friends and fans? Again, because you got at least 400 CIA agents in the news. We know this from just I don't know how many years ago it was. They put a number on it. 400 CIAs all over CNN, owned by Time Warner. Time Warner, of course, is largely intertwined with the government. We know it's operated by largely the CIA, American propaganda. You're not going to get much truth, friends and fans. You're certainly not going to understand how these forces rule the world, how they operate, unless you pick good researchers and do your own research, friends and fans. That's all there is to it. So I'm doing my best, friends and fans. I'm not perfect. So friends and fans, I have to go. I'm over my limit here. But again, try to live that fully liberated life, friends and fans, I always say, and live a full, courageous life. And we could change this world, friends and fans. We can make that societal shift, believe me. But we got to provide more transparency and open the doors for the truth. We can do it, friends and fans. And you can help, and I'm trying to help too. Thanks, friends and fans. And again, there are a lot of good people in the military and intelligence agencies. Don't get me wrong. I'm addressing the people that have covered this information, friends and fans. They've got to smarten up. We deserve the truth as the public. Stop, and we don't deserve to be treated like moronic ants, right? Take care, friends and fans. Have a great day. See ya.